Hey there, Dangar here. Today's video is about cleaning a carburetor from an outboard. It's a pretty common thing to need to do. I probably should have done this video a bit earlier because outboards, quite often the problems they have are caused by a dirty carburetor. Now the reason for that is that outboards tend to be a bit seasonal, so it's really important to sort of try and winterize it if you don't use it over the winter. Because leaving fuel sitting in a carburetor bowl, it'll evaporate, it leaves a residue. First time you sort of use the boat, that residue will just get stuck in the jets, so we'll see that. The other reason is they just live in a pretty harsh environment. The fuel tanks are generally those sort of plastic or metal tanks that sit in the boat, so they're exposed to the weather as opposed to being under a car. They've got the little vent plugs as opposed to a sort of a more sort of closed loop evaporative system that a car might have once again. So there's a lot of reasons they end up with either the residue from evaporated fuel or water in the fuel, and all these cause the carburetor jets to get blocked. It's amazing what a little drop of water will do, and give you a wide variety of symptoms of not running properly. So it's a really good sort of skill to have on your repertoire, I guess, if you're running an outboard. So let's not yak too much. We'll have a look. Today I'm going to be using a little Yamaha two-stroke to sort of demonstrate for this video, but the principles sort of apply to most outboards, but I'll talk a bit about the differences as we go through. So you're going to need a few basic tools for this job, nothing particularly exotic. I'm going to be using an air compressor to blow out the jets and the galleries and things in this, but feel free just to grab a can of compressed air from a hardware store, just a little aerosol can of compressed air. That's perfect for this job, there's no dramas there. The other things I guess I'll just be using is this 10mm socket to get the carburetor off here, screwdrivers and some pliers, and a can of carb cleaner. Other than that, just a bit of safety gear, some gloves and some safety glasses, just because the carb cleaner is pretty it's pretty full on, it's pretty corrosive. So be careful also what surfaces you're working on. It'll make a mess of paint, plastic, all that kind of stuff. So in this case I've just got some shop rag on the bench here, so just be careful where you do get carb cleaner, because it will dissolve almost anything other than metal. Alright, so let's have a look at the linkages we've got here that we need to take off first. So we'll get this carby off and then we'll start cleaning it. So on this outboard, the carburetor is just here on the front of the outboard, behind this airbox. The carburetor is on the front of all two-stroke motors, because the air-fuel mixture goes straight into the crankcase on the outboard. Whereas on a four-stroke, it's generally sort of on the side of the outboard, where it'll go to an intake manifold, where the valves in the head will sort of, feed it in. So it'll depend on your style of outboard where it is, but at the end of the day, it's still pretty much the same. It's sort of the same idea, I guess. On this outboard, there's just these two bolts with 10mm heads on them that hold the airbox and the carburetor onto the block of the motor. So we can get those off, but first I'm just going to take a couple of linkages off. So this outboard's actually missing one of these linkages, so I can't show you that, but what that is the linkage that connects the choke mechanism here. Let me show you a bit more. Yep. So there's a choke mechanism here that comes to here, and there's normally a little metal rod that connects this. So when you pull the choke, it closes the choke plate on the front of the carburetor, and we'll see that once we've got it apart. The other linkage here then goes off to the throttle advance. The ignition advance. So the ignition will advance when you turn the throttle, but it also advances when you pull the choke. Okay. So in this case I don't need to disconnect the chokes, it's already off, but I am going to disconnect this throttle advance, and then I am going to get a screwdriver here and undo this, which is the throttle linkage that opens the throttle plate, and once again you'll see that when it's open. Now this one Let's put this out of the way. So this particular linkage is loose here, so I can actually adjust this throttle plate now because it's free to slide now. I've undone this screw, but I can't actually slide that off the end. So down here I can just pop that out and then I can slide that linkage right out. So now there's none of these metal linkages attaching the carburettor to the motor. So that's the first step in removing it. The only other thing now, other than these two bolts holding it on, is the fuel line, which is on the other side. So I'll swing around the other side and I'll show you that. So this particular outboard, or this particular carburettor I should say, has a fuel pump attached directly to the side of it. Sometimes this is separate, so sometimes you'll have a fuel line going into the fuel pump, then a line going from the outlet on the fuel pump into the carburettor. But in this case it's actually the fuel pump's directly on the side of the carburettor. So all I'm going to do is grab a set of pliers. Just pop that fuel line off. That normally would have some sort of little hose clamp or something on it. Didn't in this case. That's no drama. It's not particularly high pressure, but I'll probably put a little clamp back on when I put that back. So now we've got the fuel line off and come around here and all our linkages. So all that's left holding on now are these two bolts. So I'll undo these. I'll put the camera back on the stand. We'll undo those and then we'll get the carburettor on the bench. So this is just a 10mm socket for this particular outboard. Now these bolts are quite long because they go right through the carburettor, but there's only an inch or so of thread on the ends of them. Alright, that one's through. Now sometimes, let's see how we go, it can actually be easier to take the pull start mechanism off the top. Let's see how we go here. That's not too bad. Alright, so we've got this off now. I'll just swing the camera around and we'll have a look at this on the bench. So the two main parts we've got off here are this airbox, which is just a complete plastic unit. Nothing too much about this. This actually seems to have a bit of water in it, so it's well worth cleaning this out. Methylated spirits is really good for cleaning water out of things like this, because water will dissolve in methylated spirits and then evaporate. It's actually quite a good thing to clean this sort of thing out with. So the airbox itself, as I said, it's not really an air filter. There's no air filter to clean in it, but it does act as a bit of a silencer to keep the induction noise down and stops at least water or splash getting into it. Now the carburettor itself has I guess what you consider a front and a back. So the front is where this throttle plate is. This is a video on cleaning rather than sort of carburettor theory too much, but the idea with a throttle plate is it just really increases the vacuum, so the engine's through its sort of induction cycles drawing air through. So instead of a straight venturi as the air comes across, you choke it off and then it'll suck fuel directly through. So it's a way of getting a very rich mixture which you use when you're starting it. So that's what the throttle plate is, the choke plate is. And on the back side here you've got the throttle plate, which is as you open the throttle you get a sort of a more open aperture, more air, and then eventually it takes a while to catch up, but as you get more air the fuel will then come in the same proportion. Essentially all a carburettor does is distribute or add fuel, meter fuel in proportion to the airflow. But anyway, that's not so important. What we're looking at now is just cleaning it. We don't really need to understand it to clean it, just need to know where the bits go. Okay, so in this case there's two main sections I would take apart. There's here, which is the fuel bowl, which is a bit like a kind of a, it's really a bit like a cistern on a toilet. Essentially, it's a reservoir that fuel sits in, so the fuel pump will pump fuel into the bowl, and it's from the bowl that the venturi will start to siphon it into the airflow. So I'm just going to undo these 4 bottom screws first, and we're going to separate those 2 halves. Probably one thing I should say is that quite often this bowl is full of fuel. This particular screw at the bottom is a drain screw for it. Let me find something to drain this into. I'm just going to use my little parts tray because, well, it needs a clean anyway. So even with the carburetor on the motor, you can just twist this little drain screw and drain the fuel that's in the bowl. This may not have much in it. This motor's been sitting around a long time. Oh yeah, there's a little bit there, and to be honest, it's not looking great. It actually looks like it's got a bit of water in it, to be honest with you. Let me get the camera and I'll show you that. I can show it to you, but that to me looks like more than air bubbles. It looks like there's a bit of water in that fuel. So before you even take your carburetor off, just draining the fuel into a container will show you what condition it's in. And that to me is definitely a bit of water in that fuel. So it's a good sign as to what's wrong with this outboard. And once again, that's where you go, right, definitely time to give this carburetor a pretty good clean out. So contamination can take quite a few forms, but water is definitely one of them. And it's amazing, because water doesn't dissolve in petrol, it's amazing how long a drop of water can live just sitting on a jet and blocking an outboard up. You think all that fuel running through would eventually clear it away, but quite often it doesn't. Okay, so the other thing I'd do is get yourself some sort of parts tray, whether that's a takeaway container, a coffee cup, whatever. Just make sure you keep all your parts somewhere clean, keep them together, and that way when you put it back together, if the tray's empty, you're good to go. If it's not, well, you need to find out where that bit goes. You don't want bits left over. So now that bowl's drained, I'm just going to undo these 4 Phillips head screws, which will take the bowl off from the body of the carburetor. When you, once you've got these screws off and you go to take this apart, there's a float and a needle valve in there. So ideally take this apart with the carburetor upside down. So by doing that, you're keeping the float inside the carburetor itself until you're ready to take it out. It's locked in with this screw, but the little needle valve generally is only hooked on and can be easy to lose, that's all. So this is the bowl of the carburetor. This is where the fuel sits. That's sort of that cistern part I was saying. If a carburetor has been left over the winter, and there's, sorry, I'm holding that too low, aren't I? If the carburetor has been left, or the boat's been left over the winter, and the fuel in here has been allowed to evaporate, quite often you'll see a lot of residue inside this bowl. This one's not too bad. It's actually been cleaned a while ago, so I don't know where that water came from. But that's not looking too bad. What you'll also see here is just some sort of custom gasket, sort of O-ring style arrangement that just seals against here and stops fuel leaking out of it. So just be sure to check this as well, make sure it's in good condition. So when the carburetor sits in its correct orientation, this, let me see if I can get in camera, here we go, this little float drops down like this when the fuel's low, and as the fuel in that bowl fills up, it comes up and it closes a little valve that stops it filling up. So this is what regulates how much fuel sits in that bowl. So as I said, very, very similar to a sort of a toilet cistern arrangement that people will be familiar with. So what I'm going to do is take a Phillips head. There's just one screw here that locks a pin down. One screw for that. And then this is the the float. Now what you'll see here, I'll show you while it's sitting here, just be careful because you can lose all this. Actually I'll take this out before I do lose it. This is the pin it pivots on. So it's just a little metal pin. And then here, just hooked on the end here, there we go, almost lost it, is a little needle valve. How can I show you this? See if it shows up against the orange a little bit better. Just a point, and that goes into a seat, which is in here, and it shuts it off. So as it drops down, it opens up. So it's a little needle and seat arrangement. How's this for a little technical diagram? So the needle should look pretty well formed, it's all good. If the tip's starting to look a bit damaged or whatever, just replace it. It's a couple of dollar part. So when you are looking at this little needle, there we go. Just check the condition of the actual tip, see what shape it is. While you got it apart, it's no better time to replace that if it's looking a bit worse for wear. Alright, so in this carburetor we've got two jets here that draw fuel from in the bowl that's full of fuel, regulated by that needle valve. In this case it's a little rubber cap here, so I'm going to pop that off. And then inside here we got a bit of an idle jet and a main jet. Carburetors can get pretty complicated. This is probably about as simple as a carburetor gets, but to be honest with you, it's it's in the ballpark for what most are like. These little jets are replaceable and removed by screw. If you just be careful when you're taking them out, because they are generally made of relatively soft metal, and what you want is a screwdriver that's pretty much the same width. So this screwdriver is actually slightly narrow. I'm just going to see if I can find a slightly wider one, because it's perfect for this idle jet, so I'll do this while I'm here. Make sure you press firmly on it. You don't want to damage the thread and get it stuck in there. So what you'll see is they've got these little holes on the side. I hope I can get this to focus for you. Don't know if you can see that or not, but there's tiny little holes in the body of it, and then you should be able to see straight down that way through it. Not 100% sure you're going to be able to on camera, but take my word for it. Oh, there we go. I think you could just see then for a moment. You should better see light through it. So that's the idle jet, and there's a main jet. Let me just go grab that bigger screwdriver. So and here's this main jet. So the main thing is the diameter of the hole through them. Now on the top here we've got 4 screws that hold the top plate on, and then there's a gasket under here. So on these particular carburetors, the long screws hold the float bowl, and the short screws hold the top plate on. Same diameter, just so you don't mix them up. Worth making a mental note of that stuff. This gasket covers all the gallery's circuits under here. So just be a little bit careful when you lift this up. So that's okay. Look, it's stuck. This black gasket peels away from this. I'm not going to do that because there's no point risking damaging it. And then under here are all the little circuits that air and fuel, etc. travel through. Fuel straight up most. I think it's mostly air. I'm not claiming to be an absolute expert on carburetor operation, but I do understand that the reason these are on the top is to come up and over the body to stop them draining back. There's a few issues, there's a few reasons they're that way, but the point is we just need to know to clean them. I'm actually seeing, let me see if I can get the camera in with some light and show you some of the junk in here. I don't know if you can see there's a section where there's a bit of a brass sleeve inside and there's a bit of crud around that. So that's the sort of thing we're definitely looking to clean out. You'd be amazed how with carburetors they're really they're very sensitive. These apertures, you know, inside these jets are quite small, so it only takes a few grains of things or a single drop of water to block them up. So we're not looking for enormous amounts of rust to brush away or anything. We are looking for quite small things to clean out. Okay, last piece I'm going to take off is just this little mixture screw, which is on the top. Now, before I undo this, what you do is you'll see this screw, the tip of it comes through inside the carburetor here, and depending on how it's how far in and out it is, it affects the air-fuel ratio at idle. So it's an idle circuit, that one. So what we need to do, presuming this was set up correctly to start with, is just count the half turns for it to go in all the way. Seat it gently, because once again, like this sort of diagram, this little particular needle can get quite damaged. If you wind it in too tightly, you'll end up pushing it and ending up with this sort of shape on the tip. So wind it in clockwise. So that's 1 half turn, 2, almost 3 half turns. So it's gently seated. So now I can take it out, but that helps me to return it to the exact position I found it in. And then just a quick inspection at the tip of that. It's a bit discoloured, but it's not too bad. It's not perfect. To be honest with you, if I had another one available, I'd probably swap it out. So you'll probably be pleased to know that that's now completely disassembled. I'm not going to take it apart any further. I'm not going to take this fuel pump off here. I'm going to do a separate video entirely on fuel pumps. So I'm going to start cleaning this out with a bit of carburetor cleaner. I am going to put some safety glasses on for this, because you can get a bit of spray back from aerosol carburetor cleaner, and you definitely don't want it in your eyes. In this case, the bowl's not too bad. There will be a see, there we go, casing point. A bit of spraying back. There is an outlet here where your fuel pump's going to come into the bowl, so it's worth making sure that's clear as well. But in this case, the bowl itself is pretty good. Another point I should make, I think I mentioned it earlier, these gaskets, they're designed to be in fuel. They're a bit fuel resistant, but ideally you shouldn't be getting carburetor cleaner on that like that. Sorry about that. It's a bit of bad. These will just lift out. It is just seated in. So try not to get carburetor cleaner on anything not metal. So, my bad. You do end up, where you hear people talking about putting a carburetor kit through, and if you are going to take your carburetors apart, it is worth getting a kit if you can. It'll include things like these types of gaskets, replacements, the needle for the float valve, all those kinds of things. All those things you really consider the consumables in a carburetor. Okay, so that bowl I'm going to sit there. I think that's not too bad, and then we'll get into the main body. This had a fair bit of gunk up in these top galleries, so I'm just going to give all those a good spray. What really causes problems with carburetors is all these tiny sort of pinhole apertures. They're very specific in the size they are to meter the correct ratios of fuel, and because they're very small, they block very, very easily. Also through here where our little mixture screw went, and then all the tiny holes heading back down. So carb cleaner is good like this in that it's also got a bit of force behind the aerosol, which is another sort of a bit like the compressed air idea. But the carb cleaner itself does great, you know, does wonders to dissolve this stuff. Most importantly is down through these apertures where the jets get screwed in. So this particular one here is where the needle valve was, so this is where the carburetor will actually fill the bowl from. Then we had the idle jet and the main jet. And if we open the throttle body and then spray up into here, you should see fuel starting to, or carb cleaner starting to come through in the same way that fuel would come through if the carburetor was actually in operation. Doesn't hurt to give it a little spray around as well, just to free up the operation of the choke and the throttle plate. So, next thing I'm going to do is take these little jets that I screwed out. Now these jets, essentially the aperture here will set the ratio of air to fuel. So as these get blocked up, a motor starts to run lean because it's not getting enough fuel. So spraying a bit of carb cleaner right through these is important. And we're really done. Okay, we need to blow this out with compressed air next, but that's disassembled and a bit of carb cleaner through pretty much everywhere important other than the fuel filter, which often actually isn't a part of the carburetor as such. It is technically a separate unit. So I'm going to let that sit for a little bit, just let the carburetor cleaner dissolve any sort of contaminants that are there. And you just hit a few particularly bad spots again. And then when that's had a moment to dissolve, I don't want it to really dry, I just want to give it a little moment to do it. I'm going to hit it with the compressed air. Now in this case I'm just going to use an air gun from a compressor. But as I said, there's nothing wrong at all with using a can of aerosol air from a hardware store. To be honest with you, it might even be better. You might find it's actually drier air. You know, I drain this compressor all the time, but it's kind of on the industrial side. You might actually find that the air inside inside those aerosol cans is even cleaner. So I'll start with these little jets. Hold onto them. You don't want to sort of put compressed air on them and have them go flying across the room. All I'm going to do with this one is just hold it right against the nozzle and just blow compressed air straight through it. You see some people actually put a piece of wire down here. Look, I've seen a lot of people say, look, I use a bit of brass wire, use a very soft metal, etc. I've never done it, because you can scratch these and actually increase the aperture and have a motor run permanently rich because you've increased this aperture. And the service manual recommends compressed air, and to me, you know, they made the machine. I always pretty much just go with what the service manual says. Another point to me is somebody asked me the other day about how you can convert an outboard to a larger horsepower, and really replacing these jets and the reed valves, I think there's a few different places, is one possibility, but it entirely depends on your outboard. A certain model of outboard might say that the, for example, the 10 horsepower and the 15 are actually the same outboard except for the jet size. In which case, if you've got the 15, you can't go greater. If you've got the lower of a pair, of a matched pair, you can maybe just change some jets and things and go to a higher horsepower. But if you own the outboard that already has the larger jets and the higher horsepower, the next step up to a 20 or 25 may actually be a whole different block and everything. But that fundamentally is what gets screwed out and swapped to just the mixture. Okay, so we've cleaned both those jets now. Now I'm going to put some compressed air through all these areas we've sprayed. Once again, make sure you get glasses on, because this is the worst time where you're going to get carburetor cleaner spraying back in your face if you're not careful. And let's be honest, it's actually going to happen even if you are careful, so wear the glasses. So we are now technically done. That's all there is to clean the carburetor. We now need to put it back together, obviously, but that is fundamentally a good sort of quick clean. You can definitely take every piece of plastic off these and get them acid dipped and soaked and all this sort of thing. Like, I'm not saying this is a perfect clean, but the number of times I've had an outboard not running, done this level of cleaning, and had it work perfectly, I can't tell you. Like, it's just incredible the transformation it can make with an outboard that's running badly due to a dirty carburetor. Depends a lot on the condition of the carburetor. I mean, if a carburetor has been sitting around for a decade, yeah, different ballpark. But if it's just running a bit bad, it ran well at the end of last season, you let it sitting in the garage for the winter and now it's not running so well, good chance this level of cleaning will get you back in action. Alright, so let's put this puppy back together. Top plate, just pop that on. This was the shorter screws. So 4 screws held this on. I'm just going to grab them all and sit them in and then run them down. So that's nice and easy. The gasket underneath, if that did come away from your bottom plate, just have a look. I mean, it's obviously in this case the top plate. This top plate's got a very distinctive shape, so it's pretty obvious which way it goes. If yours isn't, just have a look at the imprint in the gasket. It'll tell you exactly which way around it goes. There'll be a whole lot of sort of witness marks from all the different ridges and grooves and things that it seals. Now for this mixture screw, I'm going to pop this in, get the screwdriver, and then I'm just going to run it down gently, all the way down. And then before, when we counted, we had 1 half turn, 2 half turn, and then almost another one, and that's got us back to the original position we set this. Doesn't mean it was perfectly correct the first time we had it. There's every chance that it may have been out if someone's messed with it, but at least you know you got it back to where you started and you can start tweaking from there. So these jets, these don't have a so obviously the side the screwdriver goes in, need the big one for this one, goes to the top. Ooh, this screwdriver's actually got a bit of iron filing sticking to it, so that's something to be careful of. You don't want to go clean this and then introduce a whole lot more rubbish into it. Obviously goes to the top, otherwise you can't get it on. Now these jets don't have any setting when you turn them. There's no kind of returning it back to the original position they were in. You just simply seat it all the way down. Lightly snugs the go here. There's no tension on it. You don't want to damage them. These are brass or something quite soft, so don't go cranking it right down. But it does just have to be snugged up gently. So jets are in. Then we got this plug that was on top of here, the idler, and they're back in now. So next thing I do is just put this the float back in the bowl. Now it'll sit in like this. So once you sort of figure out, depends on the shape and which way they go. It's pretty obvious in this case it goes round. Once you know which way it goes, then you need to hang the little needle valve just off the center there. So it hangs down, let me show you, hangs down like that. Hopefully you can see that, yep. And then this little needle goes into the seat here, and it sits down like this. And then we just take this pin, slot it through, and that's where it sits. I've now got 4 screws, well 5 screws left, 4 long ones and the odd one out, which is obviously the screw for holding the float in. So I'm just going to wind that down, and I'll show you here as I wind it down. You'll see it sits at a certain angle, and then as I tighten it, the float sort of sits up at a more of a flush angle. Now that angle is really important. Your service manual will tell you the specification, so it'll drop down like that when it's there, and then when it floats back, it'll sit at a certain height, and that height has a lot of effect on how lean or rich the motor will run. Now this isn't strictly adjustable. The manual for this one actually simply says, I think the height it gives you is 10 millimeters, so there's a particular 2 places you measure between, it's about 10 millimeters, and it says if it's out of that specification, replace it. Okay, so that's just something to be aware of as well when you're putting that bowl back in, putting the float back in the bowl. So we're good here now. Now I'm just going to put this little gasket back in the bowl like that. It's actually in pretty good nick, that gasket, so I'm not worried about that. And now get this right, the fuel filter was on the port side, and the throttle connection on the starboard side. It's always good to sort of keep yourself a little bit oriented. And then we've got 4 screws that hold the bowl on. Run those down. And then the final thing we've got is just this little drain screw for the bowl, which is just a little flathead screw in this case. And it's back together. So that's now ready to go back on the motor. We've got these linkages that need to go back in. It's essentially the reverse of the process we did to take it off. Trying to think if there's any tricks to putting this back on that I can tell you. The only one I have found is when you're putting the carburetor back on, if you go ahead and sort of bolt it back on with its airbox, etc., sometimes you find that you'll need to release something to get it onto a pin like this, so it's kind of good to feed all its pins through and then pop it on. These sorts of clips are great because they're very easy just to get the linkage back in this way, and then this little clip just pushes down onto them. Something I probably should have mentioned right back at the start is when you put your here we go, throttle connection through here, this will sit at a certain point, so you want this to sit so that the throttle's completely closed. You can technically open it a little bit and lock it off, but that's not really the way to set the idle. You set the idle with the stop screw here. So by turning this one down, I'm actually pushing this throttle plate open slightly. Don't know if you can see that happening very slowly. So that's actually how the idle is set. And as I wind that screw out, the throttle plate closes. So I think that's about it. Let's just swap this camera around and we'll wrap up. So thanks for watching. I won't bore you with putting this back on because it really is just the exact opposite of having taken it apart. Like always, just take a photo before you take it out. Have a look at where all the linkages go. That way if you're confused you can always just look back at your photo. It's a great technique, no shame in that, for just making sure you get everything back in the right place. But that is the process for cleaning a simple carburetor like this. Doesn't need anything particularly expensive. Can of compressed air, can of carburetor cleaner, and a few very, very common tools is all it takes. Making sure your parts tray is empty when you finish, big bonus, always gives you a bit of confidence. But look, I know it might look like there's a lot of little bits and pieces, lots of small pieces, but at the end of the day, it's really not that hard. There's no, you know, just being a bit careful, a bit methodical is really what it takes, and I can't tell you how many problems with outboards this process solves. I'm not saying it's a silver bullet, lots of things can go wrong with motors, but I've got to say this is a very common problem and a very straightforward fix, something you can do yourself, you know. I've seen professionals easily charge, you know, 100, 120 bucks or whatever just to do what we did then, and it's certainly something you can do for yourself. So I hope you enjoyed, I hope you get some value out of this. Please subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this, and I'll catch you soon. See ya.